Morning, everybody. It's Monday, August 14th. The reason we're here this morning on this beautiful, sunny, nice morning is to talk about corn maturity, where we're at relative to previous years. The reason for this was prompted by a text I received last week from a dairy producer. It sent me a note and saying, corn seems a little late this year. When do you think we're going to be able to start corn silage? It just seems to be a little slow developing. And there is a grain of truth to that. There's no question that this year we are a little bit late, but we're going to talk about that a little bit and the impact of that. So I think everybody understands that from flower, tassel pollination, whatever you want to call it, through to true physiological black layer development is about 60 days. That time frame is about 60 days. So if you're flowering on August 1st, you can more or less expect black layers somewhere around October 1st. So from a corn silage point of view, back that up a little bit. Generally, it's a 45 to 50 day window for corn silage to get that milk line at least a good 2/3, 3/4 of the way down towards the base of the kernel. So typically on a given August 1st flowering date, your corn silage will commence more or less mid-September, third week in September. So where are we at this year? This year we actually flowered about a week ago. If you're going to peg a date, an average date, I would peg it right around August 7th, August 8th. When I was a pup way back in the day, the late Vlado Paskaric drilled into me, and this was during the 80s, late 80s, the importance of early flowering, early tasseling with respect to corn development, with respect to reducing the risk of and increasing the probability, increase the probability that customers are going to have a high yielding, properly developed corn to harvest that in that particular growing season. And so he wanted hybrids that flowered in July. You had a little bit more of that August heat, a little bit more of that longer day frame to build a little more yield. But more importantly, back in the 80s, through the 70s and 80s, when Vlado was heavily involved in breeding corn at Pioneer, one of the major risks to corn production was September frosts. It wasn't unusual back in those days to have a killing frost in the month of September. So you wanted hybrids that flowered as early as possible. You wanted hybrids that were a little bit on the early side. And if they could flower well in the first part of July, you just had that bit of extra cushion in case that killing frost occurred. Since then, particularly the last 20 years, the game has changed. We don't get that September frost in the frequency that we used to. Consequently, our risk to that killing frost month of September is greatly reduced. Now, I probably just jinxed it, and sure as heck this year we'll have a September killing frost on or about the 15th to the 20th. But all that being aside, the trend the last few years has been later in the season, well into October, even sometimes November, before we actually get a -3, -4 that'll really do a number and completely kill a corn plant. So it's led us to growing slightly fuller season hybrids. It's given us that little extra window at the tail end of the growing season. Whether that's effective climate change, I don't know, but with the fact remains we are getting a little bit longer window for corn development. So this year, the concern has been, well, we seem like we're flowering a little bit late. This is the 14th, we're past pollination now, if in pretty well every field. There's a few exceptions. If you wanted to kind of peg a particular date to hang your hat on this year, I would say somewhere August 7th, August 14th, about a week ago in there was the time when a lot of corn in our area was flowering, was pollinating. How does that actually compare with other years? Well, the great thing about doing these videos and taking lots of pictures is that I can go back and compare this year to a number of previous years. And I've done that. I've got my notes here. Bear with me for a minute. I'll open them up. We can go back to 2017 as an example. If you were going to peg a date in 2017, you would say it was August 7th. Excuse me, August 2nd, I should say, August 2nd. If you're going to peg a date in 2018 was a very warm year, early in the growing season. That date that year would be July 20th. So a fairly early flower date in 2018. 2020, July 23rd. Again, yeah, a little bit on the early side, but good. 2021, July 31st. Okay, we're right around that August 1st time frame. 2022, July 26th. So you can see amongst those years, the trend has been, 2018 is early 20th. We got another one here that was the 23rd. But then we've got 3 others that are right around that August 1st. So this year, if you think about where we're at, I mentioned August 7th, 8th. We're a week, 10 days behind maybe where we ideally like to be. That's hardly a big deal to be really concerned about. If we take August 8th, add our 45 days, we're 3rd week in September, add our 60 days, we're 1st week in October, where we can get through the black layer. So in my view, we're going to be fine. Now, if you noticed, I left out a year, 2019. You remember what it was like in 2019? We didn't get corn planted until the end of May. I remember planting corn on June 6th that year. When did we flower in 2019? Well, I've gone back and looked at some notes, some video, and as best I can probably pick it would be August 12th. So we were pushing towards basically the time that we're standing in right now, towards the middle of August that year, because we planted so late. Yeah, we shifted a little bit earlier into slightly earlier hybrids, but we didn't go wildly early. So August 12th, what happened in 2019? How was the corn yield in 2019, if you remember? Yeah, it was pretty good, actually. There was no problem with yields in 2019. Yeah, it maybe was a little bit wet if you were pushing harvest early in October and the first November. But I can very well remember and recall taking corn off the latter part of November that year, and we were easily 25, mid to low 25%. And I would say that's the other thing, the difference between 30 years ago and today. 30 years ago, it was rare, extremely rare, to get corn that was 25% or less. Typically, we're harvesting back in those days, years 30, 28, 29% was pretty normal. Well, today, we think 28, 29% corn actually is pretty wet, and we prefer not to harvest it. Yeah, drying costs are higher and all that stuff. But we're got pretty used to having corn that's under 25% on a regular basis. And we've even seen corn the last few years get down into the low 20s. My other recollection of doing corn back in the 80s, early 90s, was it would be November. And I remember many days weighing plots. I was an agronomist, a pioneer back in those days, and responsibility was go out and weigh a lot of corn plots with reps back in those times. And typically I'd have thermal overalls on, I'd have a thermos of hot coffee, and it was extremely rare to get out of that kind of garb. And you know what it's like the last few years. Heck, we're harvesting corn in light coveralls and t-shirts. So that's another indication that our falls are just expanding in their time frame a little bit, giving us more of a window for the corn crop to adequately develop and for it given time to dry down to acceptable levels. So my only message here today is that, yeah, we're a little late, but it's by no means way outside the window. We're still well within the window of developing a perfectly acceptable, perfectly high yielding corn crop this year. Certainly to date, there's no disease yet. Tar spot's not going to be a big deal. It really isn't advancing to a significant degree into our part of the world. So if it comes in, it's going to come in late. Its yield impact will be very, very small. We still got to wait and see how the jib develops, but Corn right now, very, very healthy, very vigorous, got height and all that stuff. We might talk about that another day. However, I think you can have some confidence since we've hit flower and now we're less on a heat basis. We're more on a clock that this corn crop's going to be fine. And I think actually we're in good shape for a very lovely corn crop here in 2023. Hopefully I'm right. We'll get to find out. Thanks. We'll be back again. Take care.